I was thinking about one of my favorite characters from the Lion King franchise the other day, Kovu, and it dawned on me that aside from a few comments in the movie, Disney really hasn't explained who the cubs' parents were. There were certainly some implications and insinuations in The Lion King 2, but other than that, it was never outright said who or where his real parents were. Well, after some digging and research, I've come up with the best answers I could find. But be warned, you might be shocked when you find out the truth. While it might seem like an obvious answer with Scar and Zira being Kovu's parents, it's really not that simple when you consider a few comments made throughout The Lion King 2. It's easy to see why we all thought that Kovu was Scar's son when we first saw him. I mean, he's got the same fur color as Scar, and the pair were also both drawn with green eyes. However, it was confirmed by the creators at Disney that Scar was not biologically related to Kovu at all. While at first Kovu was written as the child of Zira and Scar, it was revealed that when Michael Eisner took over as the former CEO of Disney, he decided that Kovu shouldn't be related to Scar. This was their way of avoiding any strange incestual connection between Kiara and Kovu, since the two were written to become love interests. This was probably why they added in a line from Kovu's adopted older brother Nuka that outright said that Scar wasn't the lion's father. In the movie, Nuka said Scar wasn't even his father, he just took him in, thus proving that there was no blood connection between Scar and Kovu. As for Zira, while many fans still view her as Kovu's biological mother, again it was something that the creators and the movie never confirmed. Instead, the only information we get is when Nuka refers to Kovu as an orphan, implying that the young lion didn't have a mother or a father, or at least he didn't know who they were. Which begs the question, how would we know who Kovu's parents were if he didn't even know? This first theory doesn't quite explain who Kovu's parents actually were, but more so where he came from and how he ended up in Zira's care. This theory follows the idea that Zira wasn't Kovu's actual mother, but instead she adopted him after Scar requested it of her. You see, according to this theory, Kovu was found as a practically newborn cub that was abandoned by his parents, who either belonged to a different pride of lions passing through the Pride Lands, or were rogue lions traveling on their own. This would line up with the comments made by Nuka in The Lion King 2 when he referred to Kovu as an orphan. As I mentioned before, while the term orphan could refer to a child who lost one parent, it typically refers to a child who doesn't have any parents. That's how this particular theory interpreted the word anyway. The theory suggests that after Kovu was abandoned by his family and essentially left for dead in the Pride Lands, he was discovered by a lion who probably saw himself in the young cub. That lion was none other than Scar, who at the time would have been the king of the Pride Lands. If Scar saw an abandoned cub like Kovu, he might have instantly connected to the poor lion, as he too felt like he was the outcast of his family. Scar's origin in A Tale of Two Brothers and other Lion King spin-offs always has one thing in common, which is the fact that he felt like his father treated Mufasa much better than himself. This would easily have allowed Scar to form a connection with Kovu, who, if this theory is accurate, was literally cast aside by his parents and abandoned. According to the theory, after discovering Kovu on his own, Scar likely brought him the only lioness that he knew he could truly trust to raise the cub as his heir, Zira. Again, it's worth noting that one of the most highly debated aspects of The Lion King 2 is whether or not Kovu was Zira's biological son. While some believe he was, the movie never outright tells us that he's a blood relative to Nuka, Vitani, or Zira. Then when you consider the fact that Nuka called him an orphan, it seems safe to at least suggest that Kovu didn't have a connection to either of his biological parents. Now, as the theory continues, Zira obviously agreed to raise Kovu as her own and to teach him to become the heir that Scar knew he could be. I personally like this theory because not only would it provide context as to where Kovu came from, but it would also help explain why Scar chose him as his heir rather than any other line that ended up in the Outlands. Scar likely wanted a strong lineage that he could pretend was his own, and considering that he and Kovu had the same eye color and auburn-colored fur, he probably saw that in the young cub. This way he could ensure that his legacy lived on, and he likely would have been able to convince people that Kovu was genuinely his own flesh and blood. Obviously, that never ended up happening, considering the fact that Simba returned and took the throne back from his uncle. When Scar died, any hope that he had of passing on a proper legacy died with him, though Zira would have a hard time coming to terms with that. As you saw in The Lion King 2, she was still raising Kovu to be the next king, even though he technically had no claim to the throne, especially if this theory is true and the lion was actually an orphan. But that still leaves the question, who were Kovu's real parents? Well, the first theory that I've been able to find to help answer this question involves a male lion that was featured in one of the books of the Lion King's 6 New Adventures series. series. In the book, Nala's Dare, they introduced a rogue male named Nee, who lived and wandered around a territory that was located just outside of the Pride Lands. Nee was featured in artwork throughout the book, and he was shown to have a dark brown mane that seemed very similar to Kovu's, including the cowlick that he had in the front of his head of fur. Nee also used to belong to a pride of his own, but because he was a male who was unrelated to their king, he was eventually exiled. Following his exile, he became a rogue wanderer. In Nala's Dare, Nee unintentionally wandered into the Pride Lands, but was almost immediately spotted by Pridelanders, who at this point in time were under Scar's rule. Scar's pride forced Nee back out of the Pride Lands, but before he was out of sight, one of Nala's friends, Chumvi, dared Nala to go and talk to the rogue. Now, Nala wasn't a chicken, so she took Chumvi up on his dare and cautiously went to approach Nee. However, as she was out looking for him, a group of hyenas spotted Nala and attacked her. Thankfully, the rogue lion that had just been chased away by her pride stepped in and saved Nala's life. Nala and Nee became friends after that, with Nala even offering to introduce him to the pride. On their way to meet Nala's family, though, they were attacked by another group of hyenas, and this time they were almost overpowered. Thankfully, the book continued with Sarafina stepping in to save both the lions. Sarafina then discovered that Nee had saved Nala, and as a way of thanking him for this act, she let the rogue lion spend time with the pride just as Nala had promised. Now, Nee eventually left the Pride Lands and continued to wander on his own, but according to this theory, that wasn't before he got to know one of the lionesses a little more closely. The theory suggests that one of the lionesses became pregnant after spending time with Nee, and the child that she ended up having was none other than Kovu. Unfortunately, though, if this was true, the lioness likely felt she couldn't keep the young cub since his father was an exiled rogue. Therefore, she shamefully left the young cub on its own in the Pride Lands or somewhere nearby. According to the theory, this would then be where Scar found the abandoned cub before bringing him to Zira to raise as his heir. Now, the problem with this theory is the fact that Nee was only with the Pride for a very short time, and the odds of him bonding with a member of the Pride and having a child with them seem sort of small. So, if not Nee, then what other male lion could possibly have been Kovu's father? The only other possibility that I could think of was actually mentioned in the same book that Nee was featured in, Nala's Dare. However, in this case, he was Nala's friend Chumvi. Chumvi was depicted as a lion with auburn-colored fur, much like Kovu's, and although we never got to see him as an adult lion, I wouldn't be surprised if he had a black mane like Scar and Kovu grew up to have. Now, what makes Chumvi a better choice to be Kovu's father over Nee is the fact that his age lines up more with the ages of all the other lions in The Lion King 2. Think about it. If Nee was Kovu's father, then Kovu would have only been a little bit younger than Nala by the time he was introduced and wouldn't have been able to connect with Kiara. However, Chumvi was the same age as Nala, meaning that if he had grown up and had a cub with another lioness, then that cub would have been the perfect age to be Kovu. Another reason that this theory suggests Chumvi would make a good father to Kovu is the fact that they had very similar personalities. Chumvi was depicted in the book as being very cocky and playful with a bit of a sarcastic attitude, much like Kovu. Now, the only reason why Chumvi doesn't make the perfect father for Kovu is the fact that the book series he came from is not considered to be canon. This is why it can be nothing more than a theory. In fact, until Disney addresses who Kovu's parents really are, everything about them is considered to be solely theory, which is something that's important to keep in mind. That being said, if you had to guess, who do you think Kovu's real parents were, and why do you think they weren't around in The Lion King or The Lion King 2? Be sure to let me know in the comments below.